What is up, Ravens flock? Huge shout out for your support for the 410 Sports Talk. James and Glenn are the best in the business. They're killing it right now. They love talking Raven talk. Make sure you go subscribe to their channel. Let's go Ravens. Big trust.
Welcome in, everyone, to another episode of 410 Sports Talk. I'm Glenn Martin, here with my co-host James Haskell. In this episode, we are going to discuss and react to the most recent Eric DeCosta press conference that was held today at the Combine in Indianapolis. But before we get into that, take a second, hit the subscribe button, click the notification bell, and we will keep you up to date on all your Ravens news. But Jimbo, where should we start when talking about what Eric said today at the Combine?
Yeah, so I think, there's a lot of discussion, a lot of juicy topics, but I think of the three of the topics that he discussed, there are three that have the most meat on the bone. So I think three we'll discuss today are Lamar's contract situation. We'll talk about free agency and their strategy, and we'll talk about the draft. But where I want to end their strategy, where I want to start is with free agency. Because I'm really excited about it. We just did some cap numbers that we'll talk to you guys about. And it actually got me more optimistic than I was even last night in our live show. So before we talk about numbers, this is really what I'm referencing when I'm mentioning what Eric talked about. He was asked about free agency, and DeCosta, quoting Jeff Zrebiec, our guy, said on Twitter that Eric DeCosta said team will make moves to free up cap space within next couple of weeks. Said he will be talking to agents this week. So that means two things to me, Glenn: extensions and cap casualties.
Yep.
Right. So let's talk about what they can do from a numbers standpoint, and I think we can hype the people up. Talk about a few guys that have been chirping about the Baltimore Ravens.
Yeah, absolutely. Because there is, on the outset, when you look at, especially when you look at like the whole AFC North, it looks like the Ravens are, they're definitely the most hamstrung by the cap as of right now. When you look around the AFC North, of course, the Bengals have like 50 some million in cap space, and the Ravens are all the way down at the bottom, currently just 8.4 million in available space. But the good news is there's some obvious moves they could make to increase some of that space. And the first spot you got to start at, and DeCosta was asked about about this player today and said that there's been no discussions to this point about his future, and that's tackle Alejandro Villanueva. So he was a guy that caught a lot of grief this season with how he played the failed transition to right tackle. Then of course didn't get much of a shot to even give it a chance over there because he was quickly moved back to left with Ronnie going out, and he certainly had his struggles there. Had a couple good games, the Chiefs game being one of them, but outside of a couple of bright spots, it was a pretty tough year for Alejandro. They can save $6 million if they get rid of him, Jimbo.
I mean, that's not chump change, and certainly I would say we were talking about Lamar's contract being a formality, previous to some of the recent scuttlebutt, if you will. But this, for sure, I see as a foregone conclusion. I think that the Ravens make this move, free up the $6 million in cap, and Alejandro Villanueva goes off into the sunset, having made a lot more money than he initially expected. One of the things I'll say about Alejandro is he said, if you remember in his presser when he came on board, that his whole goal was to get a team to pay him enough money to pay for his MBA when he realized that he was an NFL prospect. So being an undrafted guy and making the money he has, had the career he has, is nothing but he can be nothing but proud of himself and what he's done. So yeah, I think that's a done deal, don't you think?
Yeah, it's just the end of the road. He had a great career, obviously had a great career in the military before he even started his career in the NFL. But last year, and maybe even the year before that, the signs were that it was time to hang it up. So
you got one more kicker, one more bump right out the door. Here's your envelope full of cash. Have a great life type thing.
Yeah, and he certainly, he had to earn it this year, maybe more than others, as far as the fact that his skills at this point have fallen off, and he was probably on the receiving end of some tough games, more so than in years past where he was maybe doling out some beatings up on the front offensive line. So Villanueva's gone. We see that. But who else is an obvious move that they could create some more space, Jimbo?
Yeah, I think another guy that to me, while he had a relatively healthy season, I think it's also almost as much of a foregone conclusion as Alejandro Villanueva, maybe not quite as much, but Tavon Young we would save, if I'm not mistaken, $5.8 million in cap space by flat out cutting him pre-June 1st. And so I think the Ravens do that and let him test the market. Now, he's a guy different than Alejandro where I can see him back in the fold, but certainly on a much different number. The Ravens will be more than happy to let him go out there and test the market, see what he gets. If the Jets want to pay him a ton of money, if the Jags or the Giants or, who else wants to pay him a ton of money, then have at it. But certainly if the Ravens, Eric talked about, like you mentioned, evaluating players' value. So if they consider the value there, I could see them re-signing him. But I think that's another one that's pretty much a done deal.
Yeah. Either a cut or
a massive restructure, right?
Exactly. Well, an extension that makes his cap, because right now he's got a $9.1 million cap hit. No way they enter the season under that. And now, so that just those two guys would get them almost to $12 million in additional cap space. Now, they would incur about $6.5 million in dead money. So it's not like that this money is just free and clear, and there's no penalty for cutting these guys. There is a penalty that the Ravens are going to have to incur if they decide to make these moves. But sometimes you got to accept some dead money if you want to clear out some space.
Yeah.
But the next few guys are interesting because these next three guys are still on, or I say these next two guys, I should say, are still on their rookie deals, which is something that at least in the past that this would never be even a discussion. But as of recently, they've shown that they will part ways with draft picks earlier than they ever used to, especially if they're underperforming in their position and they're strapped for cash. So, Jimmy, how likely is it that they look and they see Miles Boykin and Ben Powers together? They could save $5 million between them, so it's $2.5 million between each of them, and only incur a little under, what's this, $400,000, a little under $400,000 in dead money, which in this, to us, it's like, wow, $400,000. But when it comes to the cap, that is pocket change. So do you see a scenario where they look and say, we need that $5 million in additional space, and we're willing to part ways with Boykin and Powers to make it happen?
So to answer both your questions, yes and yes. But as far as do I see a scenario? Yes. And do I see it happening and the Ravens seriously considering it? Yes, as well. So even though, like you said, it's a bit of a rarity this early on in their careers. However, one thing that Eric DeCosta has done, if I'm not mistaken, he's selected the most players. Like he's had the most draft picks since I think he's taken over as the GM, if I'm not mistaken. So with that being said, there'll be some natural trends that will start. This could be the start of that. And so I think the most likely or the more likely of the two is Miles Boykin, in my opinion, because of the depth of the wide receiver position and the lack of production on his end, where Powers at least has had at this point, double-digit games starting, has shown that he's enough in the run game.
You had to think of that word carefully, didn't you?
Like, I mean, he's enough, right? Like he's not,
Well, he's someone that if you had to count on for a game or two, you'd feel okay about it because of his experience.
Right, exactly. So he's sufficient, but certainly not a guy
not a starter.
Heavily. Right, but the reason I think that he has a better chance to hang around is because a guy like Ben Cleveland really hasn't shown, one, that he can stay healthy, shown, two, enough game tape to where the team feels comfortable in his health or his ability on the field. Yeah. So that's why I think maybe Ben Powers has a better chance of hanging around. But what do you think about those two?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think you said it perfectly there. Miles Boykin has really shown you nothing to make you feel like you have to keep him on this roster, and it is a wide receiver position that is extremely young and talented. So why I don't see the need to keep Miles Boykin around when you consider Hollywood's here, Bateman, Duvernay, Prochet, and now Tylan Wallace added to the mix. And if you were going to add to that room, I think you would do so with a veteran, even though I think that's less necessary this year than it was last year or the year before. So I think I just don't see where Miles
Yeah.
Boykin fits in on that group.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's a special teamer, but you never want to see him out there on offense. And I think you could find some special teams help elsewhere on the team. So yeah, I think he's gone. And Ben Powers, the way Ben Powers would be gone is if they feel good about the fact that Tyree Phillips can now be a backup guard and not be so relied upon to be a tackle on top of things. Because if Ben Cleveland is to get hurt again, or if he's just not playing up to the quality, I don't think they want to put Makari in as left guard because they want to keep him as that floating sixth guy. So I think that Powers has a better shot, but if Tyree Phillips can show some growth, which for some reason they're still so high on Tyree Phillips, even though we really haven't seen a ton from him, I think Tyree could be the answer for left guard if Ben Cleveland isn't able to take the job.
Yeah, I think Tyree, what you see, at least obviously he can't stay healthy, so like that's number one.
Yeah.
But if you can, I think it's just the athleticism he has at that size, and I think he's still learning so much because he's so young in the game. So I think that's what they're hopeful of, right?
Right.
So that'll definitely be interesting to see. With just those 4 moves, just doing those 4 things outside of extensions and anything else you can possibly think of, the Ravens would be up to around $25 million, I think a little over in cap space. Now, with the dead money penalty, we haven't equated that in yet. But total dead money you said is what, 6.8?
Yeah.
Yeah. So call it 19 million.
And they have very low. They only have 760 right now total. So you add 6.8 to it, and they're about 7.5 total dead money going.
Right. So you're in the high teens. So, you're comfortably in the high teens then, right?
What do you mean high teens of what?
In the money that they have available to them.
Well, you're at 16.8 in created space, but you already have 8.
Oh, right. And then you're at the 25.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a long day. I didn't sleep from 1 to 5 this morning. So compliments to Henry. Thank you. But yeah, no, you're absolutely right. So 25, I think you said this before we turn the cameras on, Glenn. You can do a thing or two with that.
You can do some things with 25. You could certainly go out and get a guy like Tyrann Mathieu, who's been linked to the Ravens like crazy and seems to like the idea of possibly joining the purple and black. And, this isn't something like the Ravens. They already showed interest in this guy. So we know the Ravens at least liked him a couple years back when they tried to get him and ultimately ended up with Earl Thomas, which we know how that went. But I do think that there's a shot they could pull the trigger on a guy like that. Now, does it mean they can, go out and just sign anybody? Like if Zadarius Smith wants to come in and get $16 million, I don't think that you've created enough space that you feel comfortable throwing that kind of scratch around. But it's certainly possible. Chandler Jones, I believe they're saying that he's not going to be retained in Arizona. So look out for that. So it gives you some more flexibility in that you could go out if you believe that this is the guy that could make the difference. I think you could go get him.
How old is Chandler Jones? I feel like he's been around for a long time, but he's not really that old.
Right. Yeah, he's not. Now, the question is, how does he fit in the system? I think he played in New England, which they run 32. A very similar system. Okay, 32.
I don't even care what system he's in. That dude can get after the quarterback.
The dude is just a pass rusher.
Yeah.
I mean,
he had 5 sacks in a game last year. He would be our second leading, right?
In one game.
Tied with Odafe Owe.
Yeah.
For second in the team in sacks in 4 quarters of football. It's
crazy.
Against a guy while coming off an injury, against a guy who's been a Pro Bowler. If I'm not mistaken, Taylor Lewan's even had an All-Pro season.
Oh, he has.
So I mean, and I mean, he made him look like doo-doo.
Yeah. Yeah. So he's been doing that since he's gotten in the league, right? He's always had monster season after monster season. So if they can make it work, yeah, that'll be a welcome sight. Now they could also create a little more space, Jimbo. If
what you got for me?
Yeah, they got some opportunities with, first of all, Marcus Peters is a big one. Marcus Peters, we do not want to see Marcus Peters gone. Let me just state
Especially
that.
After last year. No way.
No way. Big time Marcus Peters fans here, and we do not want to see him gone. So we are certainly not suggesting that they cut Marcus Peters and pick up that $10 million in cap savings. However, he is slated to cost 15.5 against the cap. So what are your thoughts on them reaching an extension with Marcus just to lower that cap number and keep him here in Baltimore for a couple more years?
Yes, and yes. I mean, Marcus Peters is a gamer. He is a winner. He is a producer. Like, I love everything about Marcus Peters' game. I love everything about his game in purple and black. Like, he is a Raven, if I've ever seen one. And I want him here for a long time. So we don't need a locker room full of choir boys. Not that he's like some terrible human either. I'm sure he's a great dude.
He's got some dog in him.
Exactly. From a personality standpoint, he wants nothing but the best. And he's not against vocalizing how he feels.
Yep.
And you need that. So yes, I want Marcus Peters here for the long term. It makes sense for him and the Ravens. Especially because I think McDonald's defense is not going to change dramatically on the back end. I think that they're going to still be called upon to play the same type of man-to-man type coverage. So, his value will be even higher there. So yes, and yes. I don't see any downside to this. Do you?
No, not whatsoever. Unless they see something from a rehab standpoint that makes them think he's not able to get back to where he was. But
would they ever cut him and let him test the market and then let that set the bar and then say, well, we'll pay you that?
I guess, but I wonder what that would mean for the dead money,
and the relationship.
Yeah, I don't think they want to burn that bridge.
Especially a guy that is very emotional. Like Marcus Peters thrives off of emotion. You don't want to rock that boat.
No, and let's be honest, what more could you ask from Marcus Peters since he's been in Baltimore?
Right.
He's balled out. I mean, he was a Pro Bowler in his first season, was a difference maker in that first season, and outside of him getting hurt, before last year, he's been spectacular here as a Raven. So I think he'll I don't see the negative in extending him unless you see something from the medicals saying that he can't return to normal. And then the last guy I want to talk about is a guy that we're high on we have high hopes for this guy, and that's Juwan James, who was signed here to be potentially the right tackle in 2022 if all things go well in his return from the Achilles tear he had last spring, which we're approaching a year removed from that injury. So, but if let's say the Ravens go out and they take a tackle in the first round, or they take maybe even another tackle in the fourth round or third round,
sure.
And Juwan James shows in camp that he's just not back to the Juwan James. He's taken a lot of time off. He took time off when the COVID year struck, and then he got hurt and missed an entire season. So he hasn't played in a long, long time. And if they don't see that he's got the ability to get back to the quality of play he had before the injury and before the COVID year, they could save $3 million by releasing Juwan James and only incur $250,000 in dead money. So that's kind of like a back pocket move that they could always pull out. It's like, the low risk, high reward.
Right. If Chandler Jones, he's a couple extra mil, right? Like,
sorry, Juwan.
Yeah. Just kind of how it is. But at the same time, being that pre or post June 1st, knowing that number is the same, they can also ride it out and say, well, let's see what this guy's got. We'll give him as much time as we can. And then if he doesn't have it, he doesn't have it. Now, that also limits you, not only him in the market, but limits you as far as who's available out there. But still, it's an opportunity for you to at least really kick the tires and see what he's got going on, don't you think?
Yeah, absolutely. You give him as much chance as as you can. However, the Ravens typically do like to treat players correctly and don't want to, drag it out, and then cut them on the last day when opportunities elsewhere are all gobbled up.
Right. But the Ravens, I think, were the only ones calling back then.
They were. They were, especially. So maybe that gives them a little bit more leeway.
Right.
Because they took a chance on him. Let's be honest. Right. Nobody else did, and the Ravens did. So those are all the moves that we can see just right off break.
Buckle your seatbelt.
No doubt, because this is an important year, and maybe I think Eric DeCosta is probably feeling more pressure this year than even his first year taking over the reins from Ozzie Newsome, who is a Hall of Famer as a GM. That's a lot of pressure right now with your first round pick, deleting all his content from his social media, with your franchise quarterback just kind of sitting with actually, you know what? Let's get into that, Jimbo. Let's get into the franchise quarterback, because that's something else that Eric DeCosta addressed when he was asked by the media over at the Combine. What did he say is the current update of the Lamar Jackson contract negotiation?
Yeah, this is the way I understood it. And this is me kind of summarizing his words, but like we've had conversations, even recent conversations.
Mm-hmm.
We'll move at Lamar's urgency, and he knows where I'm at any time, and we can discuss his contract at any time. So like if I missed any details there, I mean, I think that's kind of what so the update is there's no update.
Right.
And that Eric knows, or Lamar knows where Eric is, right?
Yeah.
So and part of me is wondering if Lamar is playing his cards until Eric just comes to him with a contract that he can't say no to. You know what I mean? Instead of the agent reaching out and say, "Hey, Eric, we need to get this done for the security of my guy, for the, for the well-being of your team, for the future of the team, whatever." Lamar's like, you know all that stuff, Eric. You know what I mean? Like, you come to me when you're ready, type thing. Like, who will blink first, right?
It could be just you never take the first offer type thing.
Yeah.
But the interesting thing is that he was quoted as saying today, "We are ready to be there at any point when he decides he wants to work on it." So it's definitely, the ball is clearly in Lamar Jackson's court. And, the question still remains, what is Lamar waiting for? Is he waiting because he's betting on himself to perform at such a high level that he wants to set the new market for quarterbacks? Or is he like what is the hesitation for? Because most people would say, get your money before this season starts. Don't step on that field, because if something were to happen, then you could hurt your future contract negotiations. And while I somewhat disagree with that, I definitely think that I don't see a scenario where Lamar can really hurt his value.
Yeah,
so
unless you're decapitated.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, at what point, right, the chances are so astronomically low that he would be, now, knock on wood, right? But like that he would be injured in such a fashion that he can't come back and play football. So yeah, I think that it's purely like, forget the storylines. If he's in his feelings, if he feels like the team hasn't done enough, I don't know. To me, it's just business. It makes common sense for me to say, if I'm Lamar Jackson, why now? Why now? Like, if the Ravens are pushing for now, there's got to be a reason. And that's simply because the longer we wait, the more and more leverage I have. The better I play, the healthier I am, the more guys that get paid, the floor.
That's the big one, Jimbo.
Right. Exactly.
He's waiting. Every time he sees a
Kyler
quarterback
Murray,
get
go
paid,
ahead, dude. Go ahead. Get your money, Kyler. Like, you know what I mean?
Because if he's going there, he's going like, they paid Kyler that?
Yeah. And
Kyler
Murray?
Look at us.
Different people.
Yeah.
They tried to compare us last year. See how that worked.
Like, come on now. Kyler is, I believe, 500.
Right.
I know Cliff Kingsbury's 500, and I believe he drafted Kyler his first overall pick.
Yeah.
So I think they're 24-24 as a tandem. What's Lamar's current record as a quarter? So it's not. So I think that he loves.
He doesn't even have double-digit losses yet.
Exactly, and Kyler's got 24 of them.
Yeah.
And also was pretty embarrassing in their last outing, where he had 2 picks, no touchdowns, and I think like 170 total yards. So,
and the huge games, like when they could have clinched the division against the Seahawks, and there's a lot of stuff where Kyler just, especially considering all the weapons he has.
My goodness, they built the entire. I mean, the Ravens did too. I mean, the Ravens definitely went all in on their scheme and all that stuff, but. I mean, they went and got an air raid coach from college, surrounded him with maybe the best receiving core in the league, and built a pretty damn good defense to go along with it. So I think that whenever Kyler gets paid, Lamar should be saying, I want a lot more than that, or at least a decent bit more than that. So it's going to be really interesting to see when the negotiations
But I think it's just money.
Up.
I don't think there's any underlying issues. I think Lamar has total confidence in the staff. He loves the team. He loves the culture. And that's all I think it is. Do you think there's anything else there?
No, I mean, everything we've heard, I mean, you can see in the clip released of his upcoming appearance on The Shop with LeBron James, he talked about Coach Harbaugh. And it just seems like there's a lot of love and respect between those two guys. And I think the same can be said between him and Eric DeCosta. I think he loves being a Raven, and I think the Ravens love having him and expect to have him. I mean, he said it himself today. He said that in 5 years, down the road, we expect Lamar Jackson to be a big part of our plans. So I don't think he's going anywhere, but it will be interesting to see when the negotiations fire back up.
Yeah, for sure. And the last part of this that I want to talk about is maybe the juiciest, and the reason why Eric was in front of the podium today, the combine, the NFL draft, right?
Yeah.
This to me is Eric's Super Bowl. If you hear about where Eric DeCosta fell in love with football, it's reviewing the draft with his dad as a young kid.
So cool.
I think that's a really cool story, and that's really what sparked his interest in football, and is really what parlayed his entire career, or that parlayed has ignited his entire career, right? He's parlayed that into what he is today. There you go. That's what I was trying to say. So he said some things that I want to talk about, and maybe we can get some ideas as to their strategy. He mentioned 2 offensive linemen by name, and Evan Neal from Alabama. They had a meetup with, a little meet and greet, and hung out with him, and he had some glowing compliments of him as a person and as a football player. Not expected to be there at 14. But Linderbaum, Tyler Linderbaum as well, of course, the center from Iowa. He compared to one Marshall Yanda. He said because of his toughness, his smarts, his athleticism, his strength.
And the Iowa connection.
And the Iowa connection doesn't hurt. He's probably immune to taser as well. So yeah, a lot to, and then just to add to that, he said that, offensive line is a big emphasis here in this draft.
And it's a strength.
Right. Absolutely.
In the draft, which is not something you hear too often about a draft class.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. So I guess one of the things I would want to ask you, Glenn, before we, keep talking about the draft here, is it safe to say that the Ravens are taking a lineman with their first 2 picks?
Well, I mean, I think there's a lot of fans that would be hoping that would be the case. They want to build a fortress in front of and
with
around.
One of their first 2 picks. You know what I mean? Like not necessarily both of them.
Right. Yeah. I think that an early round offensive lineman, it just makes way too much sense. And I think I would not be surprised at all to see their first pick, unless there's a massive run on offensive line. I mean, I don't see why they wouldn't take one of these guys. I mean, there very well could be, because this is the first year in a while that we don't see a bunch of quarterbacks at the top, which just sucks. When you got a quarterback,
I know
you want to see as many quarterbacks as you can in the top 10. And right now, there's just not a whole lot of buzz. So let's hope for the Zach Wilson, throwing session to ignite somebody's name up the draft boards.
What a waste of a pick.
Yeah, it's not. It doesn't look good. But the fact, let me understand. Like, what's the point of having, like, you're limited in your time? Eric talked about what's great about the combine is your access to the players. You just don't have that anywhere else, where all the guys are in one spot and you can talk to them and gauge reactions and get a little feeling of their temperament, their personality, all that stuff. What's the point in wasting that vast, that super important time, that small amount of time, with going to having a meal with a guy who's expected to go top 5, unless there's a chance that you might be willing to make a move.
So you're saying
what's the point? I mean, I get due diligence and all, but that's like, are they going to take Trevor Lawrence out to dinner last year?
Right. And so there's got to be 2 things going on. One, the Ravens have to be considering moving up naturally, but they're also, Eric has to believe. So like, people are saying Neal goes in the top 5. Yep. I highly doubt Eric moves up 9 picks.
Right.
Because to move up 9 picks, you have to give up so much. So Eric also has to believe that a few quarterbacks will fall in there. You know what I mean? That there'll be some bonehead picks, and Neal finds his way to 10, 11. You know what I mean? He starts, but I think if you get him to 10, I could see Eric doing something at 10.
Oh yeah.
Right. But you're right. It's really interesting because that time, I mean, is immensely valuable, like you mentioned, and very limited.
Yeah.
And so, man, that's a great point. Look, I'm feeling positive about the fact that, I mean, this kid is a monster.
Yes.
And you're talking about a kid that, and I'm sure that based on Eric's comments, he's probably like, look, coach, or look, Eric, just like they say in Alabama, rent's due every day.
Mhm.
I'm all right with playing right tackle. I got to prove my worth every day.
Mhm.
Like, not one of those. Man, there seems to be a lot of divas coming out of Oklahoma, right?
It certainly looks like it, you know.
I mean, you got Big Slow.
Yeah.
You got Baker, the diva of all divas, and Marquise got a little diva in him. Now, Mark Andrews,
Kyler,
diva. Mark Andrews, no joke.
No problem with Mark Andrews.
Dude is a dog.
Yes,
But,
he is. He's everything that was advertised and more.
What do you think about Linderbaum? And we kind of touched on this last night, but Eric making comparison to one Marshall Yanda, little bit of a smoke screen there, a little bit of trying to build up his value. Like, do you truly think, based on what we've been able to hear from DraftPlex and Eric and other folks about this guy, that if he's there at 14 and we're still picking at 14, that we pull the trigger?
I think if he's at 14, I think they go ahead and pull it, because I think that they want Lamar Jackson to feel comfortable in the pocket. And we see the difference of his play when he's comfortable and when he's not comfortable. When he's comfortable, well, last time he was comfortable, he led the league in touchdown passes and was a unanimous MVP. When he's not comfortable, he's still in the MVP race. He's just not as careful with the football, not as confident stepping into his throws. And so I think that if they're going to invest in this guy, which the type of money that they're going to invest, which we already heard from when we had Qadri Ismail on, he heard the number that was offered to him, and he wouldn't give it away, but basically it was north of $40 million, somewhere in the low 40s. So if they're going to spend that kind of cash on Lamar, I think the first thing they have to do is make sure he's healthy and protected and confident. So why not go get a guy, especially when you look at like with Kansas City when they drafted what's his name out of Oklahoma, the center.
Humphreys.
Humphrey. I think it's just Humphrey, right?
Is it?
It's man.
Hold on.
It's gonna kill me. But look how good he was. I mean, this guy was incredible in his first season. So it shows.
Creed Humphrey.
That's what it is. So Creed Humphrey was fantastic right off break. And this guy is apparently light years ahead of anybody. When we had DraftPlex on, which, by the way, Jason Pruitt is the best at draft coverage, he said this is the best center he's evaluated, Jimbo.
Yeah. One of the best offensive linemen, if I'm not mistaken.
Right.
Which is crazy. By the way, Glenn, sidebar, can you give me your best line of the band Creed?
Oh, my goodness.
With arms wide open.
Oh, yeah, I do. I remember that song.
Yeah, dude. Every time I see that guy's name,
they got a lot of
hits,
hits, I got to be honest.
For sure. Anyway, now that I've completely embarrassed myself. Yes.
No, I'm excited about if they get Tyler Linderbaum, that means they think he's the hype that Jason was talking about, because they're not taking a center at 14 unless he is an absolute monster.
Yeah, absolutely. And I like this kid. I like that Jason said, look, yeah, people talk about scheme, but you can plug this kid in at any scheme. Mm-hmm. And he's he's a great football player. So I'm looking forward to that as well. Any other, we're talking about offensive line.
Well, I think the
overall strategy. What's your take after the comments today?
Yeah, so I thought what was interesting is big thing that they gained from the weekend or the week today at the Combine, or this week at the Combine, is that they can, and this is what he said, they can assess the league value on each player and use it to their advantage. Mm-hmm. And what I think what that means is find out what other teams feel about these guys, find out where other teams rank these guys. And then once you know that knowledge, you can use it to your advantage, much like they did when they got Lamar Jackson. They found out that he was not going to be taken in the first round, but I think they found out that he would have been taken had he made it to the second round. So what did they do? They trade back to the last pick in the first round, and they grab their franchise quarterback. I think that's just one example of the ways that the Ravens use that knowledge of how the league assesses players to their advantage when the draft comes around.
Yeah. Sorry. That wasn't due to your comments. It's kind of late. We're recording late, ladies and gentlemen.
Yes.
But Eric is the value piece. I have a lot of faith in Eric in assessing the value of a player and where they should be drafted.
Yeah.
I have a lot of faith in him. Now, he picked Marquise Brown over DK Metcalf. but we all make
Mhm.
mistakes, right?
He's
So,
perfect.
oh man, I tell you what though, Glenn, I'm pretty convinced that they move up in the first round. And I'm also convinced that they use some of that ammunition from the fourth round to do so. I don't think there's any way that they hold on to 5 fourth-round picks.
It's insane.
Because we had Ing Raven on last night. One of the things I very much agree with him on is that this year of all years, it is about quality.
Mm-hmm.
We've got to find a few guys that really make an impact and make big plays and big moments. Because when you think about the old Ravens, big plays and big moments, even in division games when the Browns are terrible and somehow it comes down to the last drive, Nada, Suggs, the list goes Ray, the list goes on and on. Reed, a big play is made, right? And I felt like we were missing that. Now, Peters was out.
Anquan Bolden, I mean.
Right, exactly. I mean, so my point is that we've got to find that impact guy, more than one ideally, and I think that they move up to do it. That's
why not,
right? To feel. Yeah.
Why not? I mean,
why else compile the picks?
Exactly.
To get a bunch of depth?
Exactly. Yeah, we need starters at multiple important positions. I mean, pass rush being a big one, offensive line being a big one. And then in the secondary, I mean, he talked about, offensive line will be a point of emphasis this offseason, and so will secondary, which is interesting. Because, when you look at it from the outside.
Kyle Hamilton, they move up for
Well, it's like draft like, Jason said, unless you're moving to the top 3, you ain't getting Kyle Hamilton because he's just that special. And like you mentioned, I don't see him going up that high, but that would be
a guy can dream though, right?
Yeah, that would be exciting. I mean, look, they tried to do it when Jalen Ramsey came out, but they just couldn't come to an agreement with the Jags that made sense for both, and end up getting Ronnie Stanley actually in that draft. And I mean, that worked out pretty well. Right now, it's not looking great because of the injury, but he was the All-Pro in 2019.
Plus, Marlon's better, so.
There you go. Exactly. There you go. We'll take Marlon. That's our guy. And then, so the secondary is an interesting one because from the outside, you go, well, yeah, they need a free safety. But that's it. But really, when you think about it, he talked about how you can get quality corners throughout the draft, which tells me you ain't getting one early. Like the Ravens aren't drafting a corner early. Just reading through the tea leaves there, it sounds like he's saying we're going to take a corner late in the draft.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's just what I hear.
A guy that, Jason talked about last night who's got surprising speed, length, and maybe finds his way moving up the board a little bit. The Ravens say, or a guy that's had some injuries, had a bad season as of late, and had a better season early on in his career in college, and that has found his way shifting down into the board, in that mid to late round pick. So, I don't think it'll be a name grabber.
Right.
Attention grabber, if you will. But,
but it could be like an Anthony Averett type guy where it was a later pick, but man, how valuable was that guy this year, especially?
Yeah, absolutely. So you just never know. One thing we do know, and I think it's important to remember, you brought this up before the show started, Eric DeCosta seems to be getting better and better and better every year as a drafter, as a GM, right? Like he's obviously been intimately involved in the entire process, but as the GM and throughout the draft process, being the driver, I think he's getting better. And so I'm excited to see what he does, man.
Yeah, and the one thing he did say, which this is really what drives the Ravens, is you have to have conviction in the work you put in on that player. And so if you draft a guy, say like a Brandon Stevens, and everybody's going, they're flipping through their books trying to find out who the heck this guy is.
A running back.
Exactly. But they had conviction in their selection, and boy, did that pay off. I mean, Brandon Stevens was huge for the Ravens defense. Now, he had some growing pains, but I mean, I think they're happy with the pick there, and they're excited to see what he's got. So I think that's the big thing. Have conviction on your pick, and don't. So like when you're watching the draft, guys, don't just say, well, ESPN had him ranked as a 4th rounder, and we took him in the 3rd. That's a trash pick. Every single list is going to be different, especially when you get to the mid and late rounds. Maybe there's definitely some overlap in the 1st round.
Yeah. No, I was going to say, just remember that Mike Mayock and Chucky used to be those people on ESPN and NFL Network ranking, guys in the draft, right?
Yep.
And there were terrible drafters in real life.
Yeah.
So
I mean, they got some players, but overall,
terrible.
Yeah.
So I mean, anyway, especially in the first round. Man, you talk about the later round, sure, but first round.
Yeah, I mean, they got Crosby in like the 4th. That was a nice one. That was a nice one.
But I mean, Cleveland Farrell, hot garbage,
what a stinker. And then
he can't even stay in the rotation.
No, absolutely not. He can't break
4th
the
overall. What?
Crazy. And yeah, so it's not as easy as you think. But they did have conviction in that pick, that's for sure. Even when nobody else thought that was worth it. And the final thing I have from that is, or from the presser, is there has been discussions between Eric DeCosta and Calais Campbell and his camp, in that they are welcoming a return if Calais wants to come back to Baltimore. Said he's still a heck of a player and still super valuable on, and most importantly, off the field to the young guys on the team. But most importantly, this is his decision. This is Calais Campbell's decision. So yeah, the Ravens are saying, if you want to come back, open arms. But ultimately, the decision rests on
open arms.
Calais.
But see the fine print for the money.
Yeah, well, that's the question. What's the drive now for Calais? Because the guy's made a bunch of money, but I'm sure he doesn't want to be disrespected by some league
ring,
minimum.
Baby. He wants to kiss the ring.
Yeah, he saw Eric Weddle celebrate, and he said, "You know what? That looks fun."
Yep, absolutely. So let us know what your guys' thoughts are. These are all our instant reactions and thoughts on Eric DeCosta today and his presser. Give us all your thoughts in the comments below, and we'll talk to you guys soon.
See you.